The South African government has joined in the worldwide condemnation of the violence in Israel, calling for the immediate cessation of violence, restraint and peace between Israel and Palestine. Now, gunmen from the Palestinian group Hamas launched an attack from Gaza and rampaged through Israeli towns yesterday, killing over 200 Israelis and escaping with dozens of hostages. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has declared that Israel was now at war, while Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh says the assault will spread to the West Bank and Jerusalem. Western countries led by the United States denounced the attack. At the White House, President Joe Biden went on national television to say Israel had the right to defend itself and issued a warning to Iran and other countries hostile to Israel. The United Nations Security Council will convene today in a closed-door emergency session on the escalating conflict between Israel and Hamas. This is after the group launched a massive multi-pronged attack on the Gaza Strip. Earlier on, we spoke to SABC News correspondent Mia Alberti.
We're still seeing active gunfights, body-to-body, happening inside of Israeli territory. Israeli forces say that Hamas and its fighters still control several cities and settlements inside of Israeli territory, including also in the Gaza Strip. And we are still seeing exchange of rockets throughout the night, throughout the morning, rockets being fired from Gaza, and then Israel replying with more retaliation. So it's still very much an active battlefield, a very chaotic battlefield with still a lot of questions. There's still cases of people being kidnapped. The number of missing keeps rising and rising. People are going on social media to put photos and videos of their loved ones to see if someone has seen them. And so it's a very chaotic situation right now in Israel. And in Gaza, we also have the latest report by the UN Agency for Refugees. We have around 20,000 people that have already been displaced inside of Gaza. 500,000 of people are without their food aid from the UN because everything is closed in Gaza. Banks, shops, everything is closed. So it's like a ghost town where people really have nowhere to hide from the constant bombardment that's happening from Israel. So still a very, very active situation where, well, geopolitics and peace negotiations are not even on the table yet.
And speaking of possible negotiations, tell us about the emergency meeting that the UN Council will be holding today.
Well, probably the UN will not have any effect on this, because if we look at past examples of UN security meetings, not only about this conflict but in general, they really didn't produce anything, and so it is very unlikely that this would be any different from that. Now, of course, the international community is putting pressure. The United States have offered their support to Israel. Arab countries have offered their support to Palestine, but on the this doesn't translate in anything at the moment. The best hopes that we can all get for the people of these two countries is that both Israel and Hamas decide to stop hostilities and sit down to try and get a peace deal. This is what all of the international community is asking them to do. But at the moment, both sides are dealing with an emergency situation in which Israel was attacked in their own soil and Gaza is being bombarded, and all of Palestine is in an active combat situation. So they really cannot stop and lower their arms at the moment. We're not expecting that to happen in the next few hours or even days. But again, like in the past, the UN did not have that much effect. Egypt and Turkey have come forward to offer to mediate between the two countries. Traditionally, Egypt is the country that helps mediate peace talks between these two, but what we have heard so far from the Egyptians is that they have tried to make Israel and Hamas to drop their weapons, to say so, and to come back to the negotiating table, and they're not picking up the phone, let's say so. So at the moment, very difficult to to gauge when it will be possible to actually have a ceasefire and peace talks again.
All right, joining us in studio to talk more on this as international relations expert, Dr. Charles Sinkala, who joins us now in studio. Thank you so much for your time, Doctor. Welcome to the program. So first things first, let's just get a better understanding and let's talk about the origins of this conflict. How did Israel and Gaza come to the brink?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure always coming to be invited on this occasion. You see, the conflict within that region has dated far back as, 40, 50 years ago. We can see how the Palestinians has been, regarded as not part of their territories, which Israel has occupied, or as well as Palestine, as well as included that Israel has taken their place. Now we've got Lebanon, Syria, and we've got all other now being joined into these forces. It is very difficult to understand exactly what is the causation of these wars, but we have to investigate and making sure that we find who are the beneficiaries who are fueling these wars, not to be dealt with on a diplomatic level, as to be dealt with by means of firing and killing innocent children and women and also men, and destroying property of millions and millions of dollars.
And let's narrow it back to your fair assessment, Doctor, of what's actually happening right now. What do you make of the latest attack?
I think, this is something that we have to understand. I think from the United Nations perspective, I hear now they're convening another meeting to discuss in terms of the security position within the Hamas and Israel conflict. But we've seen in the past history in terms of wars. We've seen the war, the invasion of Russia and Ukraine, and we've seen other wars as well happening around the world. There are about actually 42 wars that are happening as we speak. It has been very difficult because now it is not being operated at the government-to-government level. We've got now the new kids on the block, the PMFS, the private military and security companies who are hired by these governments to protect their territories or to attack by will. These are the ones who are not even part of the laws or bilateral relations or multilateral relations with countries. We can see the Wagner Group, how it is infested the part of Africa, and as well in the causation of the invasion of Russia and Ukraine. And now what is happening there, the attacks is not coming directly from the Lebanon government, but it's coming from a terror military wing who are exercising their duties at the cost of the people of Israel.
And speaking of that meeting, Dr. Sinkala, I'm going to take it back to the conversation I had with our correspondent, Mia, earlier on. Said this is a meeting that might have little impact when it happens. Why is this likely to be the case?
It is a lack of rectifying that the United Nations Security Council, where these all 192 member states have the signatories as part of the United Nations Security Council, although Africa hasn't got a permanent seat, but the other nations who represent the Security Council and who looks after the warfare of the world have got no military wing to intervene in terms of such military sophisticated artillery and weaponry sophisticated military contractors. They are merely going to be advising Israel to step down, not to retaliate. They will merely advise Syria not to support any terror attacks within Hamas and Israel conflict. They're merely going to ask Lebanon not to attack. But that have got little or no impact in terms of what is happening. The beneficiaries of wars continue to pocket millions and millions of dollars through the sales of arms, ammunition, and all the weaponry complex in terms of wars.
Now, Lebanon's Hezbollah says it targeted Israeli military positions, and this is in the disputed Shabar farms on Sunday, saying it was acting in, solidarity with the Palestinian people after the unprecedented attacks. Let's talk about what is the relationship between Lebanon and Palestine.
Of course, they are pro-Palestine. I mean, they've condemned, just like South Africa and many other nations, was condemned Israel to support, the conflict, between Palestine and Israel. These are bilateral talks which has taken time and time again and failed to achieve any meaningful talks behind closed doors, but they've gone now to the extreme in the escalation of wars. And, yes, Israel has got friends. Palestine, just as any other nations, have got friends who assist them in terms of making a point and making sure that the Shaba region, which has been occupied illegally by the Israelis, has to be claimed back. But these are talks that cannot be done or completed by the barrel of the can.
And Dr. I want us to bring it back to how worrisome this conflict is. Let's talk about that.
It is very worrisome. It is very worrisome. As president of Africa 55 and Organization for African Political Parties, we deeply condemn the escalation of wars and the attacks, and we believe that, we shall find in few hours from now, especially, let us see a different approach from the United Nations Security Council meeting in terms of ending these wars, because these have got a social and economical impact in terms of what is happening around the world. We can see how Russia invasion in Ukraine has impacted economically activities, especially on the African side, and many others. These nations do not only fight among their nations, but the impact is devastating, and it's something that we cannot celebrate.
And seemingly, even when we had conversations with our correspondents, she said that it looks like there won't be any end in sight at this particular point in time. What are the long-term effects of all of this that is going on right now?
Well, it's just now, putting into law that there's also other means of making money, other means like illegally type of, conflicts, creating conflicts and coming out with the solutions. This has happened, and how we have failed to condone or even protect our nations. Even though we have declared war in 1945 as a word that there will never be wars, but we can see they have come as frequent as breakfast, even if breakfast is not as frequent as what it used to be, because of the hardships that is going through. We need a United Nations, that can have reforms. Countries must sign and ratify the extended oversight to the United Nations Security Council. We need also to be included as Africans to sit on the table and have serious consequences, especially to prime ministers such as Benjamin Netanyahu, who carelessly, issued some threats, to Palestine. And I think this is how the retaliation has come. There's always a causation of every war, and there's always a third party involved in every conflict.
And Dr. Sinkala, I'm keen to also find out what more do we know about, of course, Lebanon, Hezbollah.
Well, it's a military private security company which is contracted, just like Prigozhin had from the Russian Wagner group. They are a group of militants who are robust. Possibly people have seen that they came from the political type of set from Lebanon, but now they are fully fledged military contractor, who can be hired by any government, in the pretext that they protect the integrities and the territories of Lebanon. But these that do not conform to certain laws, international law or national laws, that any other country or any other individual company can conform to. They are mercenaries. In fact, they shouldn't even be recognized. I hope the United Nations Security Council and the meeting that they're going to be held, they must talk about these private military security companies, contractors who are actually exacerbating and making sure that these wars are being fueled. They must look at the elements of these wars, and especially the beneficiaries of these wars, because for every war, people do not fight for nothing. They always fight for something. And at the end of the day, there are people who are celebrating because the money is in the bank.
And let's speak about the Gaza Strip and how long it's been under blockade, and what are the effects of all of this?
It's devastating. If you go to those nations, many of these things are not aired on the air because of certain reasons. But United Nations and United States have been involved into trying to, making sure that those escalation of those military complex. But, all of this has just exacerbated, because you find that the United Nations are assisting either sides of the war to protect themselves by using guns. I personally feel that, you cannot fight fire with fire. One has to use water to distinguish fire.
Doctor, I have to thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. And we thank you so much for your insights as always. And of course, that was international relations scholar Dr. Charles Sinkala joining us there to further unpack this issue.